The future will bring big questions to Texas. Artificial intelligence is on its way.
AI has supercharged our ability for a lot of us to do our jobs and get information. The flip side to that is it has also supercharged our ability to get misinformation.
We will have the strongest protections for our constituents.
In studio, we hear from the Texas lawmaker overhauling state laws for the new technology. Then we hear from a new Texas-based group hoping to make sure humans remain in control and not the other way around.
We want to make sure that AI is aligned with human values, that we can control it, and that it does what we want it to do.
Plus, a behind-the-scenes look at the back end of the internet.
Everything has to have a physical footprint somewhere, and that's here.
A historic amount of data flows through centers, and we get exclusive access to the ones calling Texas home.
This is Lone Star Politics from NBC5 and the Dallas Morning News.
Good Sunday morning. I'm Phil Prazan from NBC5.
And I'm Gromer Jeffers, political writer with the Dallas Morning News. This morning, a deep dive into artificial intelligence and its coming impact on Texas.
AI is quickly transforming industries in the state, and while lawmakers encourage its benefits, there are growing ethical and big-picture concerns. This spring, state lawmakers passed a law aiming to encourage responsible AI use. House Bill 149 requires local governments to disclose how they use AI. It bans media encouraging self-harm and criminal activity. It also bans social scoring and creating sexual images of children. It also creates the Texas AI Council overseeing a sandbox program where companies can experiment with state oversight. State Representative Giovanni Capriglione, the AI guru in the Texas House, wrote the law. The Southlake Republican also co-chairs the state's AI Advisory Council. He joins us in studio this morning. Representative, good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
You too. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You know, Representative, AI is taking the world by storm. What do you think is the most significant piece of legislation you passed this session to monitor, to make sure we have responsible AI?
Yeah, we passed a lot of good technology policy this year. We passed the Texas Cyber Command. We updated our privacy laws. We even did quantum computing. But one of the most important things we did was work on our AI framework, one for public and private sectors, to make sure that we provide the right and appropriate guardrails around how these tools are being used.
And so you feel like it was a good start? Then?
Yeah, it is. You know, this is moving so quickly, it's growing so fast, but what we felt that we absolutely need to do is get something done after a lot of conversation with stakeholders, right? It's in every part of our lives today, whether it's when you go to the doctors, turn on your thermostat, you go in your car. AI is being used everywhere. So, of course, we need sensible, good regulations on how these tools are being used.
And before Phil drills down on some things, so in theory, what do you have to do next? How do you keep building on it? What does that look like?
Sure. Well, one of the things we're doing, of course, is we're constantly talking to folks and keeping our pulse on it. I mean, for myself, I'm talking to legislators in other states. We started a multi-state group. We've talked, and I've gone to Washington, D.C. to go see what policymakers are working on there. But we also have this committee that's part of this AI legislation to get constant feedback, and so that it's adaptive as we move forward and the technology changes.
And this AI committee is going to oversee the sandbox program. From what I understand, it's somewhat of a new idea. How does that work? What does the sandbox program do?
Yeah, one of the things we wanted to make sure is absolutely have these good regulations in place and these laws to restrict some of the most onerous things that AI does. But at the same time, we don't want to restrict innovation. And so the sandbox is kind of a little bit in between. We say, listen, with the proper licensing, with the proper authority, with the proper transparency, you can go and experiment on your own before it goes to the consumer to see if things work and don't work, right? So it's a way to protect yourself, to go and develop these tools, but at the same time with the realization that once you're commercializing this, it has to follow all the rules and all the laws.
Gotcha. And the new House Bill 149, the Texas Attorney General enforces the law. That's going to be a completely open seat in 2026. There are a couple candidates running for that spot. But why put all the power in the Texas AG's office to police something that is extremely powerful and will impact everybody?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's an elected position, so of course that way that whoever that is in the next session will be responsive to the voters. We had done something very similar with our privacy legislation last year. It was one of the strongest digital privacy laws that I was able to pass last session, and we put that, again, that ability to enforce to the Attorney General. They have sophisticated analysts that know a lot about the technology, very good attorneys who have already worked on really involved cases, but also on genetic cases and other things. So that same skill set is already in the Attorney General's office, so we're hoping to bring that to AI as well.
They've done it before, so and you like what you see out of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we probably have the best enforcement of any state.
And so if there's a fake image of Phil out there, I would then have to complain to the Attorney General, who would take action. I could not sue them, whoever made that image.
That's right. Whenever this law becomes effective, January of next year, we'll have a website that's easy to find and easy to go and file a complaint, and that will be investigated by the Attorney General. And
another specific item of the bill about capturing biometric data, faces, fingerprints, something like that. Question, though, when it comes to law enforcement on this, is there a law enforcement carve-out? Because I have done some reporting in the past of, Clearview AI. Some police departments use facial recognition software to find somebody they're looking for. What is the fate of that with this law?
Sure, and it's probably one of the most contentious parts of our legislation that we were able to put in that says no one can intentionally attempt to circumvent the Constitution, right? So let's take the Fourth Amendment. So in our legislation, we say if you go and you create something that goes and doesn't respect people's rights, that you're going and downloading and assuming that they're guilty maybe before a court of law. If you're taking that data, if you're taking that facial stuff, in order to do that, you may be in violation of their constitutional rights.
Really?
And therefore, this would not allow the government to be able to contract out for that kind of stuff.
So Clearview AI could not be used, maybe, in the future.
That could be, yes.
There was a difference of opinion in the past couple of weeks with Senator Ted Cruz, who said, basically he wanted to roll back the ability of states to control or monitor or regulate AI. It didn't happen in the big, beautiful bill that passed. But are you concerned that there may be another attempt by the federal government to rein in what states can do?
I think that, well, for those who don't know, there was this attempt to go and say any state law regarding and whether that was prevent abuses like child sexual abuse material, if it was, all of these, in my opinion, great laws the states have worked on, this moratorium would have removed. And I would say, obviously as a state rep and as a legislator, we listen to our people closely, right? And we're able to enact these laws very quickly. The federal government hasn't made any progress at all when it comes to AI. So the idea of removing state laws without even contemplating something else to put in its place would really put a lot of our citizens at risk. And so I'm glad that it was voted down 99-1.
What's your biggest fear with AI?
My biggest fear is how it can be used by some bad actors to negatively affect human behavior, to go and spread fake news, to go and create fake licenses. I'm also worried about how it's going to affect the workforce. We see all the time how people are being replaced, and I just want to make sure that we have a way to be able to keep training our workforce, but also being able to ensure those guardrails are in place.
State Rep Giovanni Capriglione, thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you.
So coming up, the threat of AI, it's right out of a science fiction movie, and one Texas-based group is taking it very seriously.
Plus, North Texas is now the second largest AI data center market in North America. Why the attraction and the impact of on the electrical grid. We continue Lone Star Politics this morning with more on artificial intelligence.
We reported last week how businesses were using the technology to save money on human resources, administration, and marketing. The Texas Association of Business held a training with the Richardson Chamber of Commerce to teach small businesses how they could use it to help them.
AI literacy is going to be a prerequisite for small business success. Just the way you think about the state of Texas, and really every state says you need to be able to read by the time you exit third grade. Every small business is going to need to understand how to effectively use AI tools to survive.
But there's another side, the threat, job losses, criminals using it for evil, and straight out of science fiction, humans losing control.
The Texas-based group, the Alliance for Secure AI, worries about artificial general intelligence overpowering humans. Longtime Republican consultant from Texas, Brendan Steinhauser, was just tapped as its CEO.
Creation of wealth, advancing scientific discoveries, a lot of good can come out of AI that is used for those specific tasks. What we're concerned about is what's called artificial general intelligence, AGI. And you know, think about a very, very powerful computer virus backed by the smartest computer hacker you've ever met. And then give that person a PhD in every science and every subject known to man. And they don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't rest. They're just computing all the time, planning, plotting, and executing plans. That's a little bit scary when we're talking about creating this intelligence, this artificial intelligence that by all accounts will be far superior intellectually to human beings. That puts us in a really precarious position.
You are somewhat trying to protect humanity against the things you see in movies, the Terminator movies with Skynet taking over.
A lot of these leading lights who have been thinking about this for decades, who have been, professors of computer science and AI, who have actually contributed to the building of these technologies, have been expressing these concerns. And the scariest part is that even the people in industry, like the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, has literally said, yes, AGI, if we build it, could destroy humanity, but there could be some great companies along the way. So it does give us pause when somebody in industry who's building this technology is saying that.
Now you're scaring people.
Well, I believe, I'm an optimist. Like, I believe we can actually get this right for humanity. I believe we can, if we have the proper safeguards in place, we can solve that alignment problem and we can make AI work for humanity. And so that's really what the focus is. And I have some colleagues who are doing some great work on that, trying to solve that problem.
Last week, Senator Ted Cruz pushed or supported rolling back the ability of states to regulate AI. It didn't happen, but it begs the question, how should AI be regulated? Should it be state by state? What should the federal role be?
Yeah, it's one of those things that it depends on who you talk to, and there's a lot of different opinions about this. But I think that the way I would lay it out is when it comes to things like national security and geopolitics, that has got to be a federal policy set. When it comes to things like protecting children online from, all sorts of horrific things that AI can be used for, when it comes to states having a say with what state agencies are doing with AI, that's clearly a state prerogative. And because AI is going to be so prevalent in pretty much all aspects of society, I think there's a role for the federal government and there's a role for the states.
Are you worried at all about how tough it could be to regulate an industry that potentially will always be changing, always be getting different and even more tough to rein in?
Yeah, it really is tough to regulate something and to pass laws when something is changing this fast. And so I think what we've really talked about is focusing on things like, the frontier labs, having better security, better information and physical security so that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't just come in and steal the technology from American companies. That's something we can do. That's something they can frankly do on their own. You can look at things like the export controls over these chips, these powerful computer chips that are something we don't want to be smuggled into China, but are being smuggled. And so there's legislation on that I think would allow us to better track those chips and prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. And so things like that, I think you can do. I think that trying to pass, an overarching, set of regulations would be tough, but finding areas to work on narrow specific things, I think is the right approach.
Data centers may not grab your attention as you drive by, but what's happening inside directly impacts your life.
Anything that you do on your phone or if you're streaming TV, everything has to have a physical footprint somewhere, and that's here in the data center.
We'll take you inside as Texas emerges as a leader in the industry. You are watching Lone Star Politics. Jobs, entertainment, nearly every aspect of our lives is stored, processed, and transmitted. Now, all of that information needs to be housed in servers, grouped together to make it all work. Texas is becoming a hub for those data centers in the country. I went to Garland to talk to the people at NTT Global Data Centers. On the north side of Garland, along Lookout Drive, is one of many facilities now calling Texas home. To get inside requires someone to go through a web of high-tech security measures. Rooms visitors cannot leave unless the door is closed behind them. Iris scanners and facial recognition locks. All of it protecting sensitive data streaming through the internet, like financial data, passwords, health information, and everything that passes online.
Anything that you do on your phone or if you're streaming TV, everything has to have a physical footprint somewhere, and that's here in the data center.
NTT Global Data Centers operates more than 150 facilities across the world. 3 are operating in Texas, with another one under construction. They have the space, the cooling, and the power for their clients, mom and pop businesses to multinational corporations.
This is a 1 megawatt retail vault. So this could have upwards of 40 clients in this one space. We might have another vault that has a single client, or they take a whole building.
This 230,000 square foot campus needs 126 megawatts of power and has 65 generators on site just in case a power problem comes up. And Texas is becoming a hub for centers like this because of its central location in the United States, its large amount of power generators, and its large tracts of flat land with a stable environment.
You wouldn't be able to stream your favorite TV show. You wouldn't be able to email at work. Everything is dependent on data centers.
But look, a lot of power is needed to run data centers. ERCOT planners say the state will need to double its amount of power in the coming years. To learn more about that, I spoke with Steve Lim, a vice president at NTT. Because lawmakers have been very concerned about that since 2021, when we had a pretty deadly winter storm. A lot of power went out in Texas. This year, the legislature, they put in what's Senate Bill 6, which has what's been called a kill switch, but it is an emergency tool to kind of can reach down into big power users and shut them off. What are your thoughts about that? Will that even affect you?
In theory, if it's managed well, it shouldn't have an effect. And I think one of the things that we talk a lot about and want to make sure that we're educating communities about is when we build data centers, we already have backup systems in place. In most cases, not universally, but in most cases, we have backup generators. And so if power is lost for any reason, we have the ability to move to generators and maintain the operation of the data center. If there is some sort of a kill switch, if it's done in partnership, and I'll share with you, we've already done this in the past in Texas, California, and Virginia, where the demand on the grid was very high for whatever reason. Typically is in the summer, California and Virginia being prime examples, where the usage is very, very high by residential when there's heat waves, primarily air conditioning units in residential. In those cases, the power companies came to us and said, hey, we need to remove or lower the demand on the grid. How can you help us? And what we're able to do is pull off of the grid and move to generators and continue to run and operate the data centers and remove that load from the grid. And so the State Bill 6, and I'll be candid, I'm not an expert on it, but I'm assuming that there is some ability where they're going to say, hey, we need to pull that power back from you. And if we do it as a partnership, we absolutely can support that.
Texas will see a lot more of these data centers in the future. What should a community know if one of your data centers moves, nearby or next door?
The way that data centers consume power in partnership with the power providers is in a somewhat fixed manner. So we have a power agreement and we have purchase agreements with those power companies. And it's different in every community depending on who that power provider is. But it's a consistent usage. So if we contract for a megawatt of power, we can use up to that megawatt. We can't use more than that. And that's very, very different than residential consumers of electricity who can turn on more lights and plug in more devices and use more power and simply pay for what they use. we have a contracted amount and we can never go above that.
Has the data center industry seen a rise in demand and the need for data centers in this rise of AI and artificial intelligence? Is that, I mean, are you becoming more in demand, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I smile because the growth curve has been pretty amazing. Data centers were growing probably on average of 20% year over year anyway, which in any industry, I think people would be very excited about that growth curve. The predictions are that AI specifically will add anywhere from 10 to 20% additional growth to that. So you might see that 20% potentially even double.
We're going to stay on top of this AI issue. Next week, a special edition on THC in Texas.
Thanks for joining us this morning. A special edition of Meet the Press with Kristen Welker is up next.